Thank you for joining us today. My name is Crystal Ruiz, and I am here with Dr. Tom Slayton again.
Hey, everybody, I'm Dr. Tom.
Today, we're going to talk about why preachers today don't necessarily preach about evil. And I think we were talking before the show. I think you brought up a really good point. What is evil?
Evil is not doing something that you should be doing and you know you should be doing it. It's doing good when you don't want to do good. And people say, well, they did good. Yes, to not do good is to do evil.
So when you do something wrong, like disrespecting your parents, is that evil?
It can be evil. It depends on the intent. A lot of things we did to our parents, we didn't mean them to turn out as bad as they did, but they did.
Yeah. Sometimes I think we say things that we didn't really mean, and that's not evil.
Right. You really run into very few people that their intent is to do evil. I think a lot of things that people call evil in reality is ignorance. They don't know you shouldn't do certain things like that. You know, my mom taught me from the time I was a little boy, always do unto others as you would have done unto you. Mm-hmm. If you don't like it done unto you, don't do it to nobody else.
That's in the good book.
Yes. Now, to do otherwise is to do evil.
That's a good way to look at it. But what's the difference between evil and demonic? Because there's a line, right?
Okay, demonic has to do with a spiritual intent. See?
So is that of your own fruition?
Yes, right. It's something that you just decide. You know, we are spirits created in the image of God, and we can allow the meanness to come out or the goodness to come out. To be demonic is to lean towards the evil side. You don't have to do it. That's your desire. So you're leaning to the demonic. Whereas you can lean to the angelic also, where you will do good all the time.
That's interesting. So people have a choice of good and evil, but why are we not hearing the preaching? I mean, I remember being a kid having the bejeebies scared out of me. You remember way back when you still have those pastors around. Right. I know you're okay. Well, he's way older than me, so I know that you. And we're gonna stick with that because hey, you know I'm not owning my age. I'm 39 again.
39
again. Okay. No, 29 again. Something like that. I've forgotten already.
Yeah, it does.
It is what it is, but I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not as old as you. So I didn't grow up in the age where you grew up, where powerful things happened in the church and in the tents, because you had a lot of tent revivals, right?
Yes, and what happened in the church when I grew up, there was a lot of meanness and struggling for power. Everybody wanted to be up front and noticed, and you can't be. You know, I think the scripture teaches us that we're to walk in love. It's a deliberate thing. It's something you decide to do. People say, well, I don't understand how you can do that. Well, I explain to you how to know what you can do and what you can't do. Stand in front of a mirror and smile. Mm-hmm. Stand in front of the same mirror and frown or scowl. It's up to you. You make the choice whether you want to walk in good or you want to walk in evil. Yeah. And the more you know Christ, the fewer times you will walk in evil, because evil is a natural tendency with us rather than good. And the scripture teaches that we have a tendency to want to make someone else feel bad so we can feel good. But you find out as you walk with Christ, you can feel good and they can feel good also.
Does society today help perpetuate that? The walking in evil? I mean,
yes, very much so.
Do you remember? I mean, I'm not that, like I said, I'm not that old.
I ain't that old either.
But I remember on TV, you couldn't even show a midriff. Like when I was a little kid, I dream a genie couldn't show her belly button, you know? And now their bikinis when they're on TV are practically
Right,
tape,
right,
piece of the
right.
tape. I mean, we
No,
would never have thought that.
that's the difference in society. I don't classify it as evil per se. Certain people will take it and observe it as evil, but they don't have to. The people performing, they perform what they have to do to be the top gun. Whereas you can sit back and go to scripture and find out this is evil and that is not. And that's what people are not doing today.
I think though when you look at television today, I think it can, and movies, I think that it can, and it does perpetuate evil in a sense that you see violence on TV that you didn't used to see that. I mean, if they had a violent scene, they would kind of blur it out, you know, so you wouldn't see the details.
But you know,
But then
Crystal,
it got worse.
violence is not necessarily evil. That's what
Oh,
people no, violence is not. It depends on the intent of the violence.
so what do you mean? I mean, violence to me, violence is violence. That's not good.
Okay, violence is violence, but suppose it's to protect you or your children.
Yeah, but I wouldn't call that violence.
That's what it is, whether you call it that or not.
Like if somebody's protecting their family,
They have
That's-
to use violence.
that's
It's still
okay.
violence.
Okay, I get it. You're
You know.
the use of violence. I get it.
Yeah, you can
But
say
when-
the use of violence. Or,
So I guess more of what I'm saying is then it's the evil side of it that it shows. So you see a lot of movies where you'll see somebody go out there and take a hatchet to a whole bunch of people, right? And nowadays they show the whole scene, they show everything. So it desensitizes people and they see this. And so when they see something in reality, you know, a lot of the video games will do the same thing. And they see it in reality, it's not so shocking to their system, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing. It's not evil in itself, but I just think that a lot of what is shown is not and does not need to be really shown. If you're good at your job at writing, if you're good at television writing, film writing, if you're good at book writing, right? You don't have to be that graphic to get your point across.
right. I know
Right?
exactly. It's sort of like if you would watch TV shows from the early 60s, they could create an image and you would know what happened
Yeah.
because of the words that they used. Whereas now they have to show you every detail of the meanness, every
Yeah.
detail, the bloody this, that wasn't necessary.
No, because your imagination worked.
Right.
Like when we were kids, don't you remember playing I was Lone Ranger, you know, and Tonto? Oh, that was all the, you know, I mean, it was a little older than we were,
I
but
was
we
the
saw
Lone
those
Ranger, don't you
reruns.
start-
I tell you, we saw those reruns, and we had our broomstick, and we pretended we were on
I'll
that horse. That's
silver
right.
away.
But they don't do that now.
No, they don't.
Now I remember, and I'll say that when I was a kid, I remember my mom having a similar conversation, and it really wasn't. It wasn't as bad as she made it out to be, which is probably the way people are saying about me right now. But I remember my mother having those little green army men. Remember, and how they'd make them do violent things,
Yeah.
and my mother would have a fit. You know, that was not right. You know, she let him be a boy, but granted, my brother almost blew up a tree, so I don't know how well that went. But you know, he was a kid. Thank God she found out in time. I think I screamed when I saw smoke behind the tree. I thought he was trying to start a fire, and instead he had a gas can. So
That'll work.
yeah, not exactly good. But and kids will be kids, but I just worry about society today showing all this graphic stuff when it really doesn't need to. It's like sex. You know, I don't care what you do in your personal life. Like that's between you and your better half, right? But I don't want to hear about it. I
Yeah,
don't want to
you
know the
shouldn't have to.
details.
Yeah, you
I
shouldn't
don't
have
want to
to,
know
yeah.
the details. And that's exactly it. I shouldn't have to watch a movie and be forced to see that.
Yeah.
But if you choose to see that, that's your own business. I just simply turned off or Go in the other room. I don't, I don't need to see that. It just
Well,
doesn't appeal to me. I like a good story.
Yeah, I think back over my childhood when it came to meanness. One of the meanest things I could think of is when this stuff called super glue came out.
Oh, yeah.
We used to take and put super glue all the way up the door.
Oh, and
I mean,
glue that door.
That was mean.
Yeah.
Well, now that's laughable,
Oh, yeah.
Whereas now somebody would stick an axe through the door.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's crazy the way the terms have evolved
Yeah.
and the people have become desensitized. You say showing things will desensitize you. Example, when I was a deputy sheriff, I went through the academy, I did everything any cop would do. I had never saw a dead person other than in a funeral parlor.
Mm-hmm.
I had never saw a dead person at the scene of a murder. I had never saw a murder victim. I had never saw a suicide victim. I had never saw a person that committed suicide by hanging, etc. Well, what happens is after I did see all of these things, I became desensitized.
Mm-hmm.
I could walk in and see a dead body and go,
Yeah.
the kids over there, pick them up, put them over there, Whereas there's something on the inside of us. We have to learn this bad and atrocious behavior rather than just deciding to be good all the time.
And in these end times, as we believe we're in, we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot more
Mean
stuff.
things.
Yeah. Yeah, evil stuff. We're seeing
Yeah.
a lot of it. And so I just don't understand, when you were a kid, these pastors had fire in their belly, and man, you knew, and like I said,
You were going to hell.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Fire and brimstone, as I say.
Right.
And now, I mean, I never was into that. I don't like to be scared. I've never had a fearful relationship with God. That's not how I see him. I've never known him that way.
And fortunately, that's not the way he is. You mentioned a fearful relationship with God. I think of the things we were taught as little children. You can't go to heaven unless you wear a certain pair of shoes.
Oh, yeah.
You can't be dressed like that and expect to go to heaven.
Yeah, if you're a girl, you have to wear a skirt.
Yes, you have to wear your Sunday best when you go. That's not true.
I used to climb trees.
And I remember when I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I can't figure out all of these things they're telling me. I can't believe it's true because of one reason. She said, what's the reason? I said, God sent us here naked.
No.
I got one of the best smacks she ever gave me. I mean, it came from the sky.
I got one better for you. And I'm going to tell on my son. Sorry, son. My son asked me if we're all going to be naked in heaven because Adam and Eve were naked. And he goes, I don't want to see everybody naked. God's not going to have us naked. If we're not comfortable, he's not going to have us.
I honestly, I have thought about that. I've thought about it as a boy. I've thought about it as a man. I've thought about it as a man of God. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. When you are a policeman and you're walking in the police station and walking around in the police station, how many policemen do you see? None.
Mm-mm.
So I think regardless of how everybody is, you're going to be paying no attention. You're not even going to see
That's
it.
what I think. That's what I think. I think it's exactly.
You're not going to see it.
And I think to myself, Jesus says there's many rooms, and that we all have a room in God's house,
Right.
Because we're God's children, right? So I think to myself, and I really was totally disillusioned about how people lived in the time of Jesus. How did they, what type of home did they have? And that Chosen show kind of showed me a little more and got me thinking a little outside my little box and going, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Well, it
even though
couldn't be because in the Bible, they talk about palaces all the time.
Right,
You
but
think palaces changed? No.
I went over to palaces in Europe. I've been there. They're like blocks of brick. Like,
Some of them,
I
but they
mean,
got palaces over there too.
well, yeah,
I've been in those too,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen them, but from the outside, but
yeah. Well,
it
they might,
just,
might not compare to, what you find in Florida, but, you know,
yeah. Well, I just didn't think, and I couldn't get my mind around that concept that everybody's not. He doesn't have a room that has a solid brick bed that you're going to have to lay on with a brick pillow. That's your room. It's going to be probably something what we're used to,
I would
right?
think so. I would think it would be better than what we have now
Yeah,
because that's what
because
we expect
he
of
loves us
God.
more,
Yes, it's what we expect of God.
and so he's going to have
Yeah,
something better than we have.
right.
Whether it be like I was on the floor in a tent or on a bed or in a chair,
Yeah.
he's got something better planned for us than we have.
I was fortunate. I never had to sleep on the floor in a tent, but I slept on the subway in New York.
Oh, you are gutsy, man. There ain't no way I would sleep aside. I've been
Well,
there.
that's now. The subways were so safe and everything.
Even
It was.
even when I was there, they weren't safe.
I'll tell you a cute story about the subway. When I was a kid, we did not have much of anything. And that's the way it was, back in the 50s. So when we started going to the subway, I figured out, oh, wait a minute. I was examining this peanut machine. And I said, now, how can I get some free peanuts out of this machine?
Oh,
So it dawned on me there's a little prong that sticks down that stops the thing from going down. When you put the penny in, it would push it down. I'm examining all these things. So I took a bobby pin and I straightened it out and I stuck it in there. Oh, I could get free peanuts. I said, oh, this is so great. Then I decided, wait a minute, there got to be a faster way. So I turned the bobby pin up where it was like at an angle and it wouldn't go in. You could turn it that way. And I took my drill
oh.
and I had a prawn
Where was this peanut machine?
in the subway.
And so you're drilling in the
You
subway?
know, ain't nobody caring. This is
Oh,
New
it was
York
one of those
City.
old drills where you had a handle, so they
Yeah.
couldn't tell really, maybe.
Yeah. So I thought, man, this is great. I really got it made now. And a guy came along. He says, what are you doing, man? I said, I'm getting the peanuts, man. You want some peanuts? He says, get away from me. Let me show you something. He says, if you want peanuts, this is what you do. You reach to this by. He says, you bring a pillowcase with you. You put it over there and pick out the glass.
Oh,
So I say that to say this. There's more than one way of doing things. There's more than one way God teaches each of us to walk in love towards one another. And it doesn't come out the same, but it all equals the same thing. We finally get the peanuts.
finally get the peanuts, huh? So let's get back to how
This
they.
is crazy, ain't it?
I know we always have these crazy conversations. So let's get back to teaching from the pulpit and why you don't see that. I mean, we know that the fire and brimstone went back then. They used to teach us, you didn't do anything wrong. Like we left one church because they told my mom that we couldn't wear pants, and we were little girls. Well, I climbed trees.
Right.
And I was a tomboy, and even as a small child. And so once it came to that, and they were really forcing the issue, my mom decided she wasn't going back to that church ever because she wanted us to be children and not just
Well,
something little pretty to look at.
I think one thing that has happened over the years, seriously, is psychology has changed. And what was important, say, back in the 60s and the prohibitions from the 60s, they became favorable in the 70s. So, the things that your children will do, we couldn't even think of doing
No.
something like that because it would have been classified as evil and it would send you to hell. And along with the psychology, the conversation has changed. We're a lot more, I don't want to say liberal or necessarily lenient, but we understand the meaning of words more so than ever before.
Yeah, that's one thing that the little telephone, they don't have telephones anymore, the cell phone
Yeah.
does for you, because it allows you access to look up these words. And I found that, we homeschool our kids. Our kids are very articulate. They look up the meaning of words. And my oldest child is so much so she's very articulate. She loves to write. And I'm hoping that, she loves to write fantasy books. And she started with little stories, and they get longer and longer, and she's now trying to learn to combine it together to make a story, a
Right,
book.
right.
And hopefully they're not going to be real, I don't want to see sex in it, honey. If you're writing a book, please don't write about sex. And I don't want to see people killed, like the graphic part of it. Remember when you'd read an Agatha Christie and your imagination took you there.
Right, right.
Sherlock Holmes, your imagination took you there. They didn't need a lot other than the description of the style they're writing in, and it was.
Well, I remember from the 50s TV, it was shocking for somebody to be killed
Oh yeah,
and to see someone dead on the show. No, the shows were about other things.
right. A
They were
story.
about how good this horse is and how they finally chased this horse down and he was a wild horse and all of the good things that brought up good feelings rather than pointed you towards how to be mean.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
mean, think about the Lone Ranger. And if you haven't seen the Lone Ranger,
Most haven't, dear.
look it up and watch some of the shows. It showed up on
They won't like it.
app. No, actually, my kids sat down and enjoyed it.
Really? You
And
showed them
and
a lot of
because
them. Okay.
not really, just a couple, because they told a good story. So it was like you went in and the Lone Ranger comes in and he, here's a crime that's happened. And the Lone Ranger comes in and he wants to find out,
solves it.
right,
Yeah.
what's going on here? What's really behind the scenes of this?
Right.
And he solves it like a detective.
Right.
But he was cool because he rode a horse. And he could pull that horse up and hi-yo silver and away they go.
Yeah.
But it was so cool to see the kids' reaction to that. But to me, your writing should be something that inspires you to use that imagination and use that. And nowadays, it just, it's different.
I'll tell you a real funny about the Lone Ranger. I grew up in New York City. I watched a lot of Lone Ranger. Had never been basically out of New York City after I had moved there from Virginia as a 4-year-old child. I finally got out of New York by joining the military. Well, I was in Texas.
Oh,
And what is known in Texas? Horses.
yeah.
So we got off the base finally, and I got out and I went down and they were renting horses.
Oh, you didn't. You tried.
Well,
Okay.
I'm thinking, what does a horse do? I'm silver.
Oh.
So I got on. I brought the horse back. The guy was so mad because what I did was I lathered the horse.
Right.
Now, I didn't know what that was. They never talked about that on TV.
Yeah.
I had lathered his horse. He wanted to kill me.
Oh.
He was so mad.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had to run.
No idea. Yeah.
But it's amazing the things that we get in us that are innocent, but they're not innocent everywhere.
Right.
So what we have to do is we have to go and find out what are we supposed to be doing versus what we want to do.
So when we look at, let's jump back to the church. When we look at the church and we look at finding a good church, what should we look for in a church? And I'm not saying that everybody should look for the same thing, but what I'm saying is, what do you think is important? What should people look for in a good church?
How closely they follow the precepts of the Bible.
Okay, and what do you mean by that?
Well, how close do they follow what would Jesus do? So many churches, they're following a man. They're following a personality. They're
Like a
following-
pastor.
Right.
Okay. Or preacher.
What seems right. No, if you're going to go to church, you have to know why you go to church. You go to church to serve God and to learn more about God. Well, if all they're teaching about is how to build a brick house, you don't want to go to that church. You want to go where you will learn how to worship, how to praise, and how to serve God, and how to call on God in time of need rather than just rely on yourself.
And how to listen.
Yes,
Because I think a lot of times we don't close our mouth long enough to listen.
right.
And then when we do listen, we make the mistake of telling them no.
Well, I've gotten in the midst of pastors, and I was with a group of, I think, of about 6 pastors, and they decided they couldn't hang with me because I was too Bible.
Yeah. To Bible. What does that mean?
That means I quoted the Bible too much, and I expected things to be done Bible-wise rather than earthly wise.
Isn't that their job? Isn't that what a
It's
pastor's
supposed to be, but you'd be surprised it's not.
Well, like I said,
Everything taught in seminary is not right.
well, and I think it's changed over the years.
Well, I didn't see that God changed over the years.
God hasn't, but they have. Like the church
Well,
has.
why should it? It should not.
Right. Now, it shouldn't be fire and brimstone. What they did to
No,
us, I don't think
it shouldn't
is
be fire
right.
and brimstone.
But
God didn't make it fire and
no,
brimstone.
I don't think Jesus was fire and
No,
brimstone. I
no.
think he could have been. And I think he had the right when he turned over the tables in the synagogue. But I don't think that Jesus represents something that I would say is fire and brimstone.
No, it's not.
I think he was love. And I
Right.
think that
Right.
that's why when I say that I don't see God as evil, he doesn't do, when I read the Bible, and I told you I started in the Old Testament, I've read the whole Bible at one point, but in various, sittings,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So I decided a few years ago I was going to read the Bible again, and I started from page 1. And I got 3/4 of the way through, and I went, this is too violent for me. I don't understand why God would say this. And I that's not the God I know. So then I said, I'm going to pause that section and I'm going to go to this New Testament and I'll start there. So then I read the whole New Testament. Then I reread it. And I've read it maybe one or twice since then. I'm in the process of reading it again because I think every time we read it, we learn something new.
Well, you pick up something different, something, I call it, pops off the page on you that you
Yeah.
never saw before.
Even if it's just one word.
it's just
and
one word,
you
yes.
said it before, shall and may.
Yes.
Those mean two different things.
Oh, my goodness, yes.
And sometimes we don't see that the shall means different than the may. Because we're too busy thinking in our own mind
Yeah.
and trying to answer our own questions and not shutting up.
And finding out where this is going rather than the journey along the way.
Right. And I think if we're in the midst of something and we read it in the Bible, it doesn't really hit us. Like when I went to meet with Trump and Scott had said, well, first Chuck, my husband, had said, you're like Esther. And I was like, yeah, right. And then Scott Miller came down and said, you're like Esther. And I went, what is with you two? Well, I don't see it. And so I took that Bible and I took the book of Esther because I really was a little nervous. I mean, you're meeting the leader of the free nation. And I'm flying from here to there. And I read the book of Esther and then I read it again. By the time I got there, I'd read it like 3 times and I still didn't get it. I was like, I don't see it. What does Esther have to do with me? And walking into the room, I didn't see the 200 plus photographers across away from me, to be nervous. God just put that
Yeah,
blinder up, that
sure.
curtain there that I didn't see him.
Sure.
And all of a sudden I saw him. And then when Trump was in the room, I didn't see him anymore. I was just concentrating on
Yeah,
him.
right.
But I didn't see it.
Right.
It wasn't until I came back and it was months later. And all of a sudden I read Esther again and I went, oh my gosh, he's right. They were right. It's like being before the leader of the free nation. That's what they were talking about. But I couldn't see it in the Bible when I read it,
No.
probably because I was too in it at the time.
Well, when you first read the Bible, or a person first reads the Bible, they read it as a religious book. They don't read it as the life of people and the examples that God is setting through people of how you should live. That comes later on in subsequent readings of the Bible.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I think when you first read it, it's a story.
Yeah, it's just a story.
And then
It's the story of Samson, the
Right.
strong man,
Yeah. And you read all of the things. I mean, if you jump into Samson, look what happened to him.
Yeah.
There wasn't some good things. He didn't do,
No, it
eh,
wasn't. But it teaches you how you're supposed to act and not like him.
yep. Right there, you said it. Because the Bible doesn't only teach you what you should do.
It teaches you what you shouldn't do. Yes,
Yeah, and
for sure.
I have a hard time with Samson because of that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, my kids talk about Samson. I'm good. He's not that good. I don't,
Yeah.
it didn't turn out well for him. But in the end, you know, um,
Well, in the end, they all died. So,
yeah,
it's just,
yeah, it was
now
in
what?
the end, yeah. But then you look you look at the stories of the disciples, the 12. Their lives didn't end well either.
Peter.
Yeah.
If anybody could have used more feet, it was Peter. He would have had more things to put in his mouth.
Yeah. He's
Boy,
kind of like my husband.
he kept his foot in his mouth all the time. Man,
Yeah.
how could that be,
And you think
he
he'd
got
learn.
mad at the wrong time. People, they say, yeah, well, Peter got mad and he took a sword and he cut off this guy's ear. That ain't what happened.
Mm-mm.
Peter swung that sword for his neck and the guy leaned his head over and he twinged his ear off.
Yeah.
He was going to cut his head off,
Yeah.
know. Well, that's allowing, the story behind that is allowing your anger to rise to that point that you would commit murder.
Yeah.
And that goes on today.
It does. It does. And,
It's just easier to commit murder because we have guns now.
well, it's not just guns. They look at Europe. They've outlawed guns and they're using steak knives in the street.
I don't care what you outlaw, you got plenty of them still.
Yeah. Yeah, over there they're using knives and all kinds of things. I'm like, what are they going to do? Knives and forks. What are you going to do? Outlaw knives and forks?
Yeah, outlaw poison, outlaw
Yeah, you can outlaw it all, but the bad guys are still going to have it.
and the bad guys are still going to use it too.
And that's I'm a political figure, so I am very much pro Second Amendment. I always have been. I always thought I had to write a paper in 8th grade about the gun laws and how they wanted to take away the gun laws, and I was definitely against taking away the guns because I didn't understand. Everything to me was very simple, and it still is pretty simple if you break it down. They want to take the guns away from people because they think they're going to commit a crime. And that's the basis of it. They think they might commit a crime, so we got to take them away, right? Here's the problem. If you're going to take away the tool that somebody's going to use to commit a crime, then every male in the entire world who you think might be a sexual predator would have to have their tallywhacker cut off right at the beginning. They can't have a chance to rape a woman. So that was my thinking when I was in 8th grade. It's still relevant today. It's still the same process, maybe a little more grown up, but that was from an 8th grade level child. That's the way I saw it. And it doesn't make any sense to me why people would take away the thing that keeps us America, the thing that keeps us free, and the thing that they're so desperate to take away from us is our constitutional rights, right? So if they take away that Second Amendment at all, and they disarm the American people, we're going to become Venezuela.
Well, the problem is most people don't understand why a Second Amendment in the first place. Well, what is our number one constitutional right?
Free speech.
That's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
The Second Amendment was to protect
The
free
first.
speech,
Yep.
to protect the First Amendment.
Absolutely.
And so many people, they don't understand that. And that would still happen today because they have nice, sophisticated words for it now. They would call it censorship. We're going to censor bad conduct, but we never decide who decides what is bad.
Exactly.
See? Because you decide that this is bad doesn't mean it's bad. It's what you decide. So that's where the Second Amendment came in, to protect the free speech. You still have the right to say what you want to, here in America. And having gone to various nations, I really see the importance of that. Because I was in China and I said to one of the men, well, why don't you just say this and that and the other? And he smiled at me. He says, because I want to live. I said, what? He said, I would be killed on the street if I said that. Not by any authority, just by an average person.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes, it's crazy.
But that's what
they're trained.
Well, and but that's why we built this country and the Constitution the way they did. Did you know that the Constitution, we're having a celebration the week of the 17th? We're celebrating the Constitution, and it's a national. I'm part of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and so they're doing this big celebration. So if you're in the Hemet area, you can come down to the library, and I wanted to invite you and Gail. On the 18th at 11 o'clock, and we're going to do presentations for honoring the Constitution, because people don't really understand the importance of it. They think it's just an old piece of paper. Everything in it should be changed, but they don't understand that the reason that we're able to do what we're able to do today, the reason we're able to be on a podcast and talk about Christianity and nobody's knocking on our door and trying to kill us, is because of that Constitution.
Yes.
And that Constitution, those First Amendment rights to free speech, and hate speech is not free speech.
No.
And people need
Hate
to understand that.
speech is hate
It's
speech,
completely hate speech
Right.
is hate speech.
But even they don't know what that is in a lot of cases.
No,
You know.
they don't. And it's unfortunate. People think they can say anything now. And you can't. That's not what free speech is. If you were even back in the days when they first wrote this, if you said certain things, heck, remember the witches in Salem? We had a family who was one of the witches. She actually escaped and was away long enough for them to find out that they were all innocent.
Wow.
And then she moved back. But what a crazy thing to have happen is that, they could say anything against them, and they murdered all these people, and then come to find out they were innocent all along.
Wow.
Yeah. It's horrible. So some free speech comes at a price, right? This hate speech is not something that should be tolerated. You shouldn't be able to just spew hateful stuff out. That's where evil comes in, and people who have evil intent utilize that.
I'm going to bring this back to the church. Where I have trouble as a pastor is so many folks that I know in leadership, they are appropriating hate speech from the pulpit and not even realizing it's hate speech.
Yeah.
You see, if people will just learn and remember, God is a good God. Things that don't work on your head but work on your stomach don't need to be said.
Yeah.
If you got in your stomach, don't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Say things that will gender peace, love, caring, a calmness. To get there and start pounding on the table and demanding this, that's not God's way.
No, I don't
God
think
gives you choice.
And you
He
have
don't put demands on you.
Yeah.
He lays out this and this. You can have the piece of clay, or you can have the gold. It's up to you.
You choose.
But the clay looks so much better, yes, but the gold is worth so much more. So you learn how to take your speech and make your speech count. I try to, when I'm in the pulpit, and you've known me for a long time, I try to make my words count. I try to give people something that is lasting, that is not injuresome, that they can carry for the good, that they will know that, listen, God is behind you, He's going to back you up, and He's watching out for you, rather than He's there to beat you over the head.
So I can imagine, before you even step to the pulpit, I know that you're always praying. I look over and I can see you praying, even as we're doing other things. And I'm assuming praying for what you're about to say
That's one of
and the
things.
message that it brings to the people, right? When I'm on the dais, I do the same thing, especially when I get confronted with things that are not true or not right or are things that just should not be said and that they're total lies. They just don't care. And I'm always praying on when we go to vote on something, how do I explain something and get it across without, you know,
Ruffling too many feathers.
right. I mean, we need to put it like that, but yes, I mean, I want everybody to have an opinion. Everybody has a right to an opinion. But what I don't think is I shouldn't be criticized just because I have an opinion.
Right.
I shouldn't have to go along with everybody. If I have an opinion, I should be able to be allowed to have that opinion.
Well, you can have an opinion, but you don't have to condone meanness because of your opinion.
Exactly. And I think too many elected officials do that.
Sure.
There's a lot of craziness going on in politics right now. There's a lot of craziness all around the world.
Crystal, this is not my first run in politics. When I was in another part of the country, I will say, I had to tell a politician, listen, you need to sit down. I said, you've gone too far. You are over the line.
Ooh. That's hard to do.
So sit down. He did. I was bigger than him.
What was it? Like at church, or was it
No. It was a political meeting.
Oh.
A big political meeting.
Oh, wow.
And he had a little audience too, but you see, most of the people, when they come, they're afraid to say anything. They'll mumble between themselves.
Yeah.
But they won't tell the politician. He was totally out of line. But he had gotten away with that so long, people thought that's just the way it was. No, somebody had to tell him, that is not the way you act, and this is not what the city of Inglewood wants. So don't do it.
Well, that's, and that's the thing about politics today. It's not just here in the United States. Have you ever watched the politics of Great Britain? They have fist fights in the middle of the floor. It's like, how on earth do they ever get anything
done? We would
done?
have it too.
Well, we would if we didn't have some type of order.
Exactly.
But man, it's craziness.
Yeah.
But look at what over the last couple of years, in particular, now we're in election year, so now all gloves are off and everybody's brawling, right?
Yeah.
People say things that aren't true. They go and they criticize people who they think are weak. And not for any other reason other than they want to unseat them. You see people spouting off lie after lie after lie. Lying is a sin. You shouldn't be doing that. That's going to get you into trouble. But they're politicians. Everybody uses that as an excuse. I don't care who you are. If you're a politician, you owe it to the people that you serve to treat people.
Wait a minute. Politicians serve people?
They do. They're supposed to.
Oh, they're supposed
That's
to.
what I was raised. That's the way I was
No,
raised.
I know. I'm just being
But no,
facetious.
you made a valid point.
Yeah.
You made an absolute valid point. I think politicians forget that they are there like a pastor to serve the people.
Not for themselves.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And they get these egos in there and they think that they're all that in a bag of chips. And the
Right.
reality is, how are they serving the people when they're like that? I don't see it.
They're not.
I don't see it. I go, for me, I'm all over, usually it's the city next door, San Jacinto and Hemet. I'm all over the county of Riverside because I'm on county boards. Sometimes I go to the White House, but wherever I am, at whatever level of government that I'm talking to, I'm always thinking about the service to the people.
Yes,
We had
yes.
a meeting the other night and somebody mentioned something about 35 or 40 million dollars going from an organization that I was on to I want to say Highway 79 realignment. They mentioned something about it. And it triggered something, so I sent a message immediately over to the head of that organization and said, hey, what are they talking about? What I didn't approve $40 million. What are you talking about? And it turns out they just kind of worded it wrong. And so it took a little back and forth before I realized it, because I was going to stop and say, hey, Talk to me. Tell me what you
Yeah.
heard about this, because this is I didn't approve this, but what it was over time, over so many years.
Right,
That's how
right.
much has been done. So I was like, okay, I feel much better knowing that that is the truth. But
Well, then,
you
then
know,
too, it depends on your background as to how the zeros count.
oh,
For 40 with a bunch of zeros is 40 million. I learned the value of money when I went to work for Merrill Lynch. I was a stockbroker. It was Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Finner, and Smith. And I didn't know how much money was a lot of money. And, you hear you're moving millions, it's a concept. You're moving thousands, it's a concept. And I didn't get educated until I had a lady come in and she wrote a personal check for some stock. And it was $75,000. And she wrote it across the check line and on up the side to get all
oh,
the way up there. And I thought, wow, there is so much out there. And I'm so used to dealing with so little.
well, and that's exactly
I
it.
don't have a concept. In spiritual things, we're so used to dealing with such a little, not realizing there's a whole sphere that God has to use
Yeah, and he wants us to have it all.
to expand
Yeah,
where
to
we
get out of our
are.
own way.
Yes.
I mean, I remember when I felt, I got those signs. I should be looking for other work. I should be doing something else with my life. And I didn't listen. I didn't listen. I was, I was I'm in my zone. I was making a good living. I was, granted, I had no personal life, but everything else was good. And I was constantly
Yeah.
working. Good Lord, when the holidays came around, I was 24/7 there for 3 days straight. I would sleep on the booth and I would run home to shower and I would come back. And that's where I was, because that's what I needed to do to get everything to run smoothly. But that's not where he wanted me. And I wouldn't pay attention. And I think some people, and somebody just not too long ago, I asked them if they were okay. How are they doing? They were retired, and they looked so amazing, like totally different person.
Oh, yeah.
And
No pressure.
she said, "Oh, I'm retired and I don't have to worry about all that anymore." And I'm like,
No pressure.
"Wow,
No
wow!"
pressure. Yes.
God wanted her there, and look at how she changed.
Right.
God wanted me away from that situation, and look where we are now today, doing the podcast and talking about Jesus Christ in public, something that can be seen
Yes,
around the world,
yes.
and we're not afraid.
Well, I think one of the best things the Lord ever taught me was to get up, look in the mirror, and smile.
Yeah, that's something else you say about that. It's not just that, because remember when we were in school, do you remember going to, it was, what did they call it? I used to go and practice, Sharon Kompenstein. She used to be my teacher, and we would go in and we would practice getting job interviews. And she would tell you, go into them in the morning in the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror, smile, and and so that when you're used to it, you go into your
Yes.
interview, you're naturally going to smile, right?
Right.
You always say, when you're walking down the street, smile at people,
Yeah.
and it
And
changes
they
things.
will smile at you.
Right. And you know what my dad used to say? Smile at people and they're going to wonder what you're up to. That was his take on it. But you're right. I think you're right. I think the more that we look at the world and we know these evil things are happening, we know that there is a lot of evil out there. And whether it's just the treatment of your child at school, you go in, your child's been bullied. In my case, I had my older child bullied up to the point where she had a ball, like a baseball-sized ball on the back of her head. And when you look at this situation that was horrific, and now you look at her, that didn't define her. The bullying didn't define her. She stepped
Right.
out of that, and she now, her and all my kids protect other kids. So we take and we learn from this stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's up to us to choose which way we go, right? Do we perpetuate bullying and start bullying other people? Or do we take and learn from that and protect other people? Two choices.
Well, it's interesting being a pastor and a leader, how bullying is in the Christian community. When I go to these large meetings and you get hundreds of pastors, some of them can become quite mean if you let them. Some will actually bully. I have had some at the table, sitting 8 at a table over lunch, and this one guy, he made sure he dominated everything. And nobody would say anything because you could see the words coming out of his mouth in that, I call it the snap look.
Oh.
So, I mean, what is supposed to happen? And I corrected him. And he didn't like it. He says, I don't like it. I says, well, get over it. And we left there and we were walking down the street. And it really bothers me because I was taught a certain amount of, I call it properness. And every woman that walked down the street, he would turn and lean in front of me and go, ooh, wee.
Oh my gosh. And he was a pastor?
Yeah, I let the first one go. There was a guy next to me, and he was on the side away. And we went by, another girl walked by, and he said, ooh, wow. So I let that go. We got up to the third one, and he said, ooh, and I reached around past this guy, smacked him in the back of the head. I said, you need to stop it, and stop it now, and don't do it again. He looked at me, I said, and I mean it. Well, the other guys looked and they said, thank you. We didn't want to say anything. There's certain demeanor you're supposed to have, and there's a certain amount of correction that you're supposed to submit yourself to. He wasn't doing any.
That's
so
crazy.
Somebody had to straighten him out.
That's crazy.
See?
Well, and that's the thing. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Sometimes we as individuals don't want to confront someone. We're sitting there in silent and allowing this stuff to happen or putting up with it. But we only put up with it sometimes to a certain limit. And then you get a smack in the back of the head, right? You get a smack in the back of the
I
head.
remember a meeting. We used to hold meetings in the neighborhood center. And a guy was in one of my meetings and he was cutting up. And I looked at the ushers. I said, pick him out of the seat and put him out. They looked at me. I said, pick him up and put him out. I said, I'll say it one more time. If you can't do it, I will do it. Pick him up, not escort him out. Pick him up and put him out. They picked him up and put him out, and they said, Pastor, we didn't know you could do that. I said, what are you talking about? I said, you did it, didn't you? I said, now we won't have no more trouble, will we? He was totally out of line. He didn't come back.
Yeah. He wasn't there to come back. He wasn't there to cause trouble.
He was there to cause trouble.
Yeah.
And see, me, if they hadn't, I'll pick him up, put him out.
Yeah.
But I have that advantage of
your size.
6'8", 265 will kind of make it a little easier.
Yeah, I don't think I would.
Along with the attitude.
I might have the attitude. I don't have the height. But I think we do have to stand up, and I think we have to think about, people always say, what would Jesus do? Mm-hmm. We've seen what Jesus did.
Yeah.
He was the example.
Yeah, he did not put up with everything. And people, they read niceties into. No, I'm sorry, because it's Jesus. You can't read a nicey into this.
He wasn't putting up with a whole lot.
He wasn't a Peter friend when he started off. Peter come around. Mm-hmm. But them disciples, they were a handful.
And look at how far he came to become one of the leaders.
Yeah.
Like the leader of the group.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, look, he had people, who was it, Saul, who was hunting them and killing them.
Yeah. Well, Saul was a lot later, but the original
but that's what
12,
I mean.
The original 12, I was reading and I said, Lord, you could have done a lot better than this.
He could have, but I mean, when you think about it, all of them.
But he was showing, these are the walks of life that we can get a hold of and we can change with teaching them about Jesus.
Yeah. So we'll have to continue our conversation next time. Thank you for joining us.
Hey,
Have a good day. See you next week.
bless you.